Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here. I hope you liked today's video. If you do, please don't forget to subscribe, to like it, to share it with other people. I hope you find it interesting. This topic is actually the one that got me interested in economics and the reason why I went into economics, and that is wealth inequality. In today's video, I want to explain what causes inequality. It's a complex topic and it has a lot of variables, but I will explain the basics of it so that you guys don't fall for easy fix solutions that really do nothing of the sort. So let's get into it. Before we actually get into the causes of wealth inequality, it is very important to understand that in any free society and in any free domain, it doesn't really have to be wealth, inequality is inevitable. And there is a universal principle that explains this, and that is the Pareto distribution. What the Pareto distribution tells us is that a very small minority of inputs actually cause the large majority of outputs. In more simple terms, it is the 80-20 rule, which says that 20% of the inputs are responsible for 80% of the output. So that 20% of workers generate 80% of the results or the work. And we can see this in free domains. It doesn't really have to be economics, but for example, the top 1% of Instagram accounts have more followers than the other 99% of accounts combined. In tennis, the greatest three players, so Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, have won over 80% of all Grand Slam titles since 2003. So it is very important to keep in mind that wherever there is freedom, in any free domain, there is inequality. And when it comes to wealth, it is not different. Now, that said, there are very strong forces at play right now that are driving inequality to record levels. And we really need to understand those to stop it from exacerbating, because it usually leads to socialism, because the blame is usually put on capitalism. And capitalism is really not to blame for wealth inequality. So now that we know that inequality is inevitable, let's take a look at the reasons behind the great levels of inequality we have today. The wealth inequality debate is really a debate between the have and the have-nots, between those who have money and most importantly have assets, and those that don't have money and don't have assets. And the main difference between the have and the have-nots is that the haves understand the money game. They know how to make money, how to keep their money, and most importantly, know how to grow that money. The have-nots have no idea about money. So it really boils down to understanding, and that understanding comes from education. And we have to keep in mind that, at least in the West, education is controlled by the government. The first reason behind inequality is the lack of education on money matters. And it is quite insane that in the 15 years that kids spend in school before college, there is not one class on financial literacy. So teenagers are graduating from high school without the basic understanding about how money works. And the second thing with regards to education is that schools are not designed to teach children or people, because this really goes all the way to PhDs. Schools are not in the business of teaching people how to make money. They're in the business of teaching how to memorize facts and regurgitate facts. The education system is already setting us up for failure. Like, if we don't understand money, how are we supposed to have money, to save it, to invest it? Like, the first thing is having knowledge, and the education system is not delivering that knowledge. In the US, the Department of Education in 2024 spent almost $270 billion on K-12. And that is around $16,000 per student per year. They did not incorporate even one finance class, even one money lesson. So the only logical conclusion is that governments want it this way. It is very beneficial to governments to have financially illiterate people. And that is why, even though they're spending so much money on education, they don't teach even the basics on money. And more importantly, they do not teach at all, not even in college, which is insane, about the fiat system. This ties to the second reason behind inequality, or the main reason, which is the fiat system. A fiat system is a system in which money is issued and controlled by the government. There is basically a monopoly over money and the government controls it. That money today is called currency. So currencies are issued and controlled by governments and they're not backed by anything other than a government's credibility. And in a fiat system, governments, central banks, and commercial banks have basically the ability to create money out of thin air. And this is very problematic because currencies follow the law of supply and demand. This law applies everywhere and anytime. And what it says is that when supply of something increases, its value decreases. When governments or central banks are creating money, the value of money decreases. This is called money devaluation or money debasement. What does this mean and how does it actually work in real life? So when governments or central banks create money out of thin air to give it to people, it means that people have logically more money to spend. So demand increases, supply remains the same, because while money can be created out of thin air, services and products cannot be created out of thin air. So people have more money to buy stuff, but the available stuff to be purchased is the same. Prices go up. And this is how inflation basically happens. In short, if you increase the amount of money, prices go up. There was a great economist, his name was Milton Friedman, and what he basically said was inflation is always and everywhere, basically a universal law, a monetary phenomenon. So you increase money supply, prices tend to go up. You decrease money supply, prices tend to come lower. And this is very important to understand because inflation is one of the most regressive things in the world. It's a regressive tax and it's one of the major reasons behind inequality for two reasons. It works as a double whammy. So on the one hand, you have the haves. The haves have assets. It's not like they have a lot of cash sitting underneath their mattresses. No, they buy assets. They invest their money. And if you generate inflation, everything tends to go up in price. Asset prices go up. So the people that have assets benefit from inflation because their assets go up in price, so the net worth increases. When you generate inflation by money printing, basically, you're inflating asset prices. So the people that have assets disproportionately benefit from inflation because their assets go up in price. Their net worth goes up. On the other hand, you have the have-nots. The have-nots live paycheck to paycheck, they have debts, and they have no assets. So the prices of their expenses tend to go up. So they're poorer and poorer year after year. Inequality is to a very, very large extent a direct result of money creation, because money creation disproportionately benefits asset owners and it disproportionately affects people who own no asset. That large gap is basically a result or a reflection of that massive increase in money supply. Now, I don't think that people realize the extent to which central banks are driving inequality. Now, central banks have many tools to implement monetary policy, and I'm going to focus only on interest rates right now. Interest rates are basically the price of money over time. So how much is it to access capital? How expensive or cheap it is to borrow money? Now, central banks, when they lower interest rates, supposedly to generate growth, what they do is they disincentivize people from saving money. And this is very detrimental because saving money is basically the foundation or the first step somebody can take towards wealth accumulation or wealth creation. You need to save money if you're gonna have wealth. But when central banks set interest rates artificially low, they're disincentivizing people from saving. Low interest rates not only discourage people from saving money, they encourage people to borrow money. And the people that don't really understand how money works, going back to our topic on education, think that they can just borrow money and they pay a very low interest rate on it and that they can finance their lives that way. And the only thing that this kind of debt does is make you poorer because you're accumulating stuff that depreciates over time rather than investing to increase your wealth. And it's a very drastic difference between people who understand money and people who don't. because the haves or corporations with a lot of capital use leverage to their advantage, so that they borrow money to reinvest it or to buy assets which appreciate and make their net worths go up. So they borrow money very, very cheaply, and they invest it and generate returns on that money. They're not using debt to buy stuff, they're using debt to buy assets. And those assets appreciate over time and generate returns, so that wealth keeps accumulating. Now, another way in which artificially low interest rates drive inequality, and this one is a little bit more complex, but let's try to explain it, okay? Is by inflating valuations, asset valuations, okay? So the haves have assets, and those assets have certain valuations. And this is what investment bankers do. What an investment banker does is basically forecast future cash flows, so what a company is going to earn in the future, and try to determine what those future cash flows are worth today. So they try to get the present value of future earnings. This is how it basically works. So you have earnings in the future, that means you're going to make money in the future, and you need to know how much those earnings are worth today. So you need to discount, you need to bring it to present value. And to do that, you basically take the earnings of the future and you discount by a certain rate. So how that would work is you have, let's say, $1 million in 10 years. So you have an interest rate of 10%. So you take 10% off for each period. So for each year. So year 10, you make $1 million minus 10%, that's $900,000 in year 9, minus 10%, that's $810,000 in year 8, and so on and so forth until you arrive at year 0, that's today. And if that discount rate was 10%, that would be around $385,000. So the present value of those $1 million is $385,000. But if you had the same $1 million of earnings in 10 years and a discount rate of 1%, you would have $1 million in 10 years minus 1%, that would be $990,000 on year 9. And if you do that all the way to year 0 today with a 1% discount rate, that would be $905,000. So that is a difference of around $600,000 or $500,000, right? $520,000 of difference. So what this basically means is that when you have artificially low interest rates, you're going to have artificially high asset valuations. And this ties directly to somebody's net worth, because if their net worth depends on the valuation on their assets, and their assets are more valuable because interest rates are low, well, they become richer. And so inequality is worsened only as a result of that difference in discounting. So this is one of the ways in which monetary policy is exacerbating inequality, because assets are worth more as a result of higher valuations. This phenomenon of inequality is very complex. There's a lot of things that go into it, but these are some of the major ones, or at least what I think are the most important variables. The first one, that a very small minority of people actually understand money. So if you don't really understand money, it's very hard for you to create it, to save it, and to grow it. And the second reason behind inequality is, or has to do with monetary policy, with money creation. Again, money creation generates inflation, and inflation disproportionately benefits asset owners, while it disproportionately affects the lower and middle classes. Then we have that low interest rates disincentivize people from saving money, and it encourages debt spending, while at the same time it allows people who understand money and corporations to borrow money to acquire more assets to generate higher returns so that they can build on their wealth. So it drives inequality. And lastly, we have that artificially low interest rates drive valuations higher so that net worths inflate. So these are some of the things behind inequality. Of course, this is again a complex topic that I try to simplify. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you understood. Please let me know what you think. And don't forget to share this video, to like it, to subscribe. And I'll see you here next time. Thank you so much.